Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, in the news tonight, we're going to start off updating everybody on the latest in the coronavirus, including how some people now are being infected with two strains of the coronavirus at the same time. Also, some of the side effects that people have been experiencing from taking the vaccine, including one woman, very unpleasant situation there for her. And then we have the Iran. They're coming out there and saying that even though the president of the United States has changed, the policies that the U.S. Had instituted remained the same. And also Taiwan, their government preparing for war with China. They're trying to keep their military up to date. So all this, these stories and many more. But first, the Sunshine State of California is looking very dark right now. California is leading the world in coronavirus infections with 3 million residents testing positive. Now, the biggest worry is new variants hitting the state, causing an even greater increase in cases. Now, infectious disease epidemiologist Dr. Anne Remoyne thinks there are definitely variants out there. She told CBS News, "I think it's like shining a flashlight in the dark. You're going to see something if you start to look, and we just haven't been looking."
Interesting. Well, there's been a dramatic jump in COVID deaths in just the 2 last months in LA County alone. A total of 14,641 people in the county have lost their lives since the beginning of the crisis, but 4,000 have been just since the new year began. Now, right now, there is one person dying every 6 minutes of the coronavirus, and the coroner has a blockade of bodies to take care of. And Los Angeles County recently relaxed their air quality rules to allow for a larger number of cremations.
Right, and those coroners are actually backlogged with the number of bodies that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Well, while there is so much death in an ever-worsening situation, healthcare workers and everyone alike is looking for a few miraculous recoveries that some people are making to help them remain hopeful. Also noteworthy, hospitals have seen their lowest number of new patients nationwide in recent days, down just below 120,000, which is still very high, Katan. And now, as we're about ready to report, this new variant is really picking up speed across the United States. So even though that hospitalization might be down, it might jump up real quick here in the next few days or few weeks.
Yeah, we've seen throughout the last year many peaks and valleys with the coronavirus. So this might be a valley that comes right before a huge surge. Well, across the nation, the vaccine rollout seems to be somewhat chaotic, leading to many who want the vaccine feeling frustrated and worried. In Florida, it is so bad, it's hard to get an appointment for the COVID shot right now. And to make matters worse, Florida's Department of Health says over 40,000 people are already overdue for their second dose. All of this is hard to take, especially when the Centers for Disease Control has just come out with the statement that by the middle of February, they expect 500,000 deaths in this country.
Well, as health experts study the new strains of COVID popping up, they warn mutations of the virus can not only be spread faster, but they could also be more deadly. So far, one of those powerful new variants is spreading across the country like a wildfire, already found in 29 states, including South Carolina. There, 2 people tested positive for the new strain, originally discovered in South Africa. Now, most concerning is that neither one of those 2 people there in South Carolina had any known travel history, nor did they have any interaction with the other person. So, on their own, each one somehow contracted that variant of the coronavirus, but no interaction and no travel history.
Yeah, all the way from across the Atlantic,
Right.
Here they are with the new variant. Well, scientists are now saying it is more important than ever to focus on quickly getting vaccines into the arms of Americans. However, right now that seems a monumental task as major cities begin to run out of their supplies. One such place is New York, where their stockpile will be gone by the end of the day, the governor's office says. Officials have already closed 15 vaccine distribution centers there, and they are reporting they won't be getting more doses of the vaccine from the federal government until early next week.
Well, across the country, 1.6 million Americans were vaccinated today, which is a new record. Now, still with growing concerns, the new variants could become dominant and cause the number of COVID cases to skyrocket over the next 2 months. The CDC is suggesting all people wear masks in public and the mask be made out of no less than 2 layers of fabric. Now, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson came out warning the new strain could be 30% more deadly than its predecessor.
With over 400,000 lives lost nationwide so far from the pandemic, Dr. Anthony Fauci believes things could have been slowed down much earlier on. In an interview with CBS Sunday Morning, Dr. Fauci believes a lot of the lives could have been saved, quote, if we had the public health message from the top right down through the people in the trenches to be consistent. Then things might have been different. In fact, I'm pretty sure they would have been different, end quote.
So with so much pressure to get more vaccines out to people, there is news from the CDC now that it is okay to receive the second dose up to 6 weeks after receiving the first shot. Ideally, it should be just 3 weeks after the first dose is administered, but something has to give considering supplies are low, but the demand right now for the vaccine is through the roof.
It's kind of interesting that the planning and this, the strategics going into this kind of either were overlooked with the amount of people wanting the vaccine and getting them, and then as well as getting people back in to get that second dose. Well, now it's creating a little bit of a turmoil there. And what many have feared about the new variant of coronavirus in the U.S. Now seems to be true. It could be partially resistant to the available vaccines. Yeah. Well, Dr. Ashish Jha, the dean of Brown School of Public Health, warns officials should maintain the COVID guidelines in place, not relax them, telling CBS News, by mid to late March, these variants could become quite common and dominant in the United States. We could see huge spikes in cases, large spikes in hospitalizations and deaths.
Dr. Jha also agrees the slow vaccination process is a problem, stating, quote, the longer we take, the more there are going to be opportunities for variants that could become even more dangerous, more lethal, more contagious, or just escape our vaccines altogether, end quote. And that's really what scientists have said from the beginning, that if these strains mutate, they don't know how effective their vaccines that they've created for this first strain are going to be now for these variants.
Right. While the situation seems bleak, some researchers have been studying the new strains and how they interact with existing vaccines and other treatments since they surfaced. Dr. Dan Baru, director of the Center for Virology and Vaccine Research in Boston, is one such person. He tells reporters if the vaccines out now are not effective on the new strains, then new vaccines will have to be developed. And of course, we've seen that took some time to get where we are now, almost a year. Well, is it going to be another year before a new vaccine comes out? And how many more new strains will surface during that time?
By that time. Well, we're now going to turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has been researching some more of these topics on the coronavirus, including the vaccines and some of the side effects that people have been experiencing. Larry, what's the latest?
The semblance of surety and stability which once underlay the false sense of security that fueled and fed the globe's complacency and gaiety is now shattered into chaos and uncertainty. The real world of microbial adulteration and its accompanying afflictions, created and fostered by generations of moral miseducation and disregard, is leaving the world with fewer opportunities for delusion and denial. Fear has arisen in their stead, the latest of which is over a mutation of the current plague, which officials fear will be unresponsive to the latest pharmaceuticals reportedly formulated to combat the affliction. Scientists have reportedly been mobilized to address the mutation, which is said to have originated in South Africa, that adds on to a growing list of variants of the ancient virus which have newly come up and arrived in the United States from other parts of the world. There are also fears that as the pandemic progresses and intensifies, the world might be contending with the possibility of reinfection as the U.S.'s new administration attempts to get its feet on the ground amid projections of 90,000 deaths in the coming month. As the months bring new mutations, those hanging their hopes on vaccinations are looking to scientific rivalries to produce different pharmaceuticals to address the changing nature of the virus and the consequences that have come with the experimental and toxic concoctions approved and being sold so far. One such example is the latest hype surrounding Johnson & Johnson's entrance into the field with the vaccine that employs a different mode of immunological manipulation than that of its competitors. The proposed vaccine is still undergoing trials and seeking FDA approval, but Johnson & Johnson has already acknowledged that their concoction too has side effects. As the numbers of those voluntarily and compulsorily vaccinated increases, so too do the reports of severe side effects, including public efforts like the one posted by one young man who chronicled and posted the seizures and convulsions that his mother has been experiencing since they both accepted the shot. Muscular disorders, however, while very disturbing to witness, are actually small compared to some consequences. Some elderly recipients are reported to have actually died after being inoculated. The young man who posted the video concerning his family's experiences said he's received online feedback from thousands who have all undergone a similar awakening and disillusionment concerning vaccinations. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Gatan Jeff, back to you.
Yeah, that's pretty terrible.
Interesting that the man has received thousands and thousands of comments of other people experiencing side effects, you know, much like we just saw there, you know, and he said he didn't even have time to read all of them, but, you know, so many people are experiencing side effects from taking these vaccines.
Yeah, and oddly enough, that's not making big news.
Right.
So, well, as Larry just mentioned, Brant Grinner's mother is not the only one who has raised concerns about the safety of the Pfizer COVID vaccine. Now the death of a doctor in South Florida has led to an investigation there. Dr. Gregory Michael passed away just a little over 2 weeks after receiving his first round of the Pfizer vaccine. While it is not clear if his death is linked to getting the shot, it is definitely not off the table.
Well, the 56-year-old OBGYN who ran a private practice at Mount Sinai Medical Center for 15 years received his first COVID-19 shot there on December 18th. Dr. Michael's wife posted on Facebook how her husband was a healthy man who just 3 days after getting the shot noticed severe broken blood vessels on both his hands and feet, which prompted him to go to the emergency room.
There he was diagnosed with immune thrombose cytopenia, which prevents one's blood from clotting. After 2 weeks of treatment, Mrs. Michaels wrote, he got a hemorrhagic stroke caused by the lack of platelets that took his life in a matter of minutes.
Well, in South America's largest country, Brazil, scientists are discovering that some COVID-19 patients have been infected with 2 different strains of the disease simultaneously. Now, scientists in South Brazil say that they are the first in the world to discover this type of infection. Their research has yet to be peer-reviewed and published in any scientific journal. The study has found 2 patients, both in their 30s, that have been found to be infected with 2 different strains with COVID-19 in late November. Now, the cases were mild in both patients and didn't require any hospitalization, but as we mentioned there, that's a first, 2 strains at the same time.
That's right. Well, scientists are concerned that the coexistence of those 2 strains in one host could actually speed up the virus's mutation process. New variants of the virus increase the rates of transmission of COVID-19 and increased resistance to vaccines that are being developed and used currently.
Well, some would say that the U.S. is poking yet once again at the country of Iran, as the U.S. military has recently been flying bombers over the Persian Gulf region. Now, some in the area see it as an act of aggression, but the U.S. says that it's just showcasing their commitment to regional security. Now, even though the U.S. presidency has changed hands, the policy towards Iran is one thing that has remained intact. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Zarif said in an interview with RT, the United States did not reduce its pressure on Iran. It did not allow us to make financial transactions. They said that humanitarian purchases were exempt from their sanctions, but the restrictions on financial transactions would allow for such purchases.
Well, Iran has reported 1.2 million cases of the coronavirus and 56,000 related deaths. The country has said that the U.S. sanctions have put a stranglehold on the nation's economy while making it difficult to obtain medicine. On Wednesday, the U.S. flew a B-52 bomber over the region in a move to deter aggression amidst tensions with Iran. One of the first international moves by the new U.S. President Joe Biden. Well, these flights were common under the Trump administration. In fact, this was the sixth, quote-unquote, deterrence flight in the area since November. But President Biden has stated the desire to get things back on track with Iran if the country decides to play ball.
Well, Anthony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State nominee, said in a press conference, President Biden has made it very clear in saying that if Iran comes back into full compliance with its obligations under the JCPOA, the United States would do the same thing.
Well, one of the recent deals toward the end of the U.S. President Trump's administration was the signing of normalization deals between Israel and 4 Arab nations. But no progress has been made on the biggest problem, which is peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So, at a recent UN Security Council meeting, the U.S. Deputy Ambassador spoke on behalf of the United States, stating that for the first time in 4 years, the U.S. is calling for direct talks to lead to a two-state solution. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov added to that by calling for an international conference later this summer.
Well, Norway, who was instrumental in brokering the agreement over a quarter of a century ago, explained how the deal would work. Their foreign minister said there has to be will by both parties. They have to assume responsibilities for pushing the talks forward. The Security Council, Norway, and others can assist with the foundation for talks, but the parties themselves have to step up.
And that's been a challenge for many, many years, getting both Israel and the Palestinians to get together and work in agreement on formulating some type of agreement that they can both agree with. And it's been a challenge for the international community, but the United States as well, who has been a major player.
Right, and President Bill Clinton, he got very close with back in 1993 when they originally signed that 7-year peace accord. They were working together at that time, but then Netanyahu shut it down 3.5 years later.
Right. And that was September 13th, 1993, and then October that was the signing, and October 13th, 1993 was when it went into effect. Right. Well, Taiwan has been practicing for an incursion of military planes from China recently, scrambling jets as China has been stepping up its military patrols in a way to remind Taiwan that the island belongs to China and it will take it back by force if it has to. The Office of China-Taiwan Affairs said recently, "We make no promise of the use of force and reserve the option to use all necessary measures. Our position has been persistent and will not change."
Taiwan's president said that their island is ready for any aggression, saying that they have driven back several acts of aggression from China in the recent past. Now, the U.S. has also been adding to the tensions in the area by conducting a so-called freedom of navigation exercise, sending a U.S. aircraft carrier into the South China Sea, angering Beijing, who regards the sea as largely its own. Now, Taiwan has seemingly been in the middle of the U.S.-China conflict, and there is no different. In that South China Sea, although we haven't reported too much about it lately, coronavirus has been dominating the news. Still, as we mentioned there, highly contested area. China claiming that it's theirs, but others are saying no, it's not. And you know, with the U.S. having their aircraft carrier there, definitely going to kind of spark any, it's going to reignite those tensions that were still there.
Yeah, because one of the things that the United States is doing is becoming very friendly, including militarily friendly as far as supplying weapons and things like that to those islands that are kind of southeast of the South, you know, of China, in that South China Sea, you know, Taiwan, Malaysia, and those areas. And so that also is egging China on, Beijing on, because again, they feel that not only those waters, but the islands that are in those waters belong to China. That's right. Well, the U.S. Secretary of State, that nominee, Mr. Blinken, as we mentioned earlier, said regarding the conflict, I do agree with the Trump administration on taking a tougher stance on China relations. I disagree with the way he went about it in a number of areas, but the very principle was the right one, end quote. Well, looks like the new era of presidency is bringing with it the same tensions to the Asian region as the previous one. Yeah, well, that's definitely something that we're seeing take place, as you mentioned earlier, in China, and of course, Taiwan, you know, responding to what they're saying is China aggression. The United States in the South China Sea making its military presence known there, not only there, but in the Middle East over Iran. And we're dealing with all of these things with, you know, this epidemic and COVID-19. I'm guessing it's really getting people to start thinking about the direction that the world is going to at this time.
Right, and one thing that we see pretty much across the board with all these countries, every one of them saying, we're ready for war. We're preparing. I mean, Taiwan there, not a huge country by any means, but they're saying, look, we're ready to take on any aggression. So everyone is building up their own military force, however, you know, big or small that is, and they all kind of have the same mindset that we're going to fight against any aggression that anybody sends our way.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that to note that that's the very thing that Israel Hawkins and the House of Yahweh has shown that the prophecies say as well, that are written in the sacred scriptures that were written thousands of years ago, that that's what mankind's activities are going to lead to. Not just any war, but a war that's going to leave the sun completely blocked out, nuclear war, in fact, and it's going to leave very few people left on earth. Well, of course, if you would like to know what you can do to prepare yourself for what's been classified as the dark days ahead, contact the House of Yahweh, and there you will find instructions for your protection. You can do that. Also request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and the monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at The House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them by going to any of their websites, Yahweh.com, YeshuaHawkins.com, or Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by emailing info@Yahweh.com. Any international calls, you can call the number that's up on your screen right now. And once again, you'll see there listed the two programs, Bible study helps, completely free, the Yisrael Says program by going to YisraelSays.com, and the Ask Yisrael program by going to AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Prepare your pencil or pen, your paper, and your scriptures, because up next, another very informative message from Israel Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Hammerman.
Thank you for watching.